There is nothing to watch. I mean, where are the messy reality TV shows? I need the drama on Netflix. What was that? Oh, count me in. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review and recap. Today we're diving right into Netflix's latest reality TV series, The Ultimatum Season 1. But this is only the review for episodes 1 through 8 because Netflix was so kind to send them over to me, and we can't talk about episodes 9 and 10 until next week, so stay tuned to the channel for that. But guys, this show is nuts. Like I said, the first 8 episodes are now streaming on Netflix, and the finale and the reunion are dropping next week. That's 10 episodes in total, and if you don't know much about The Ultimatum, let's break it down. There are 6 different couples on the verge of marriage. One partner is ready to get married and the other isn't quite sure, so an ultimatum is issued, and over the course of 8 weeks they must commit to marriage or move on. And in the meantime, each will choose a new potential partner from one of the other couples in a life-changing opportunity to get a glimpse of 2 different possible futures. So essentially, couples come in together, then they kind of break up and they date someone else, and then they come back together and see if it can work. It's a lot. But guys, before we get into it, there are time codes down below because we're going to start with my spoiler-free thoughts, and then we're going to get into all my spoiler recap. We're going to talk about the couples in depth, and you're going to get my commentary. Now, before we get into all of that, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about TV and movies like this all the time. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you are a fan of The Ultimatum. Let me know, guys. Let's have that conversation down below. Which couple is your favorite, and which couple is your least favorite? Because there's a lot to get into, and we'll talk about the trial couples too. I know, it's a crazy title. Alrighty, y'all, so it's time for my spoiler-free thoughts, and right at the top of the list is, man, this kind of feels like Love is Blind, but only because of our hosts, Vanessa and Lachey. After that, things get different, and the show just sort of hops right into it. It was a very unconventional way to begin the actual season. I thought that they would maybe give us some more backstory on these couples, some B-roll of them together, but instead, they just literally throw us right into the game. But one thing is for sure, the production value here is much better than it was in Season 2 of Love is Blind. If you missed all my reviews and recaps for that season, you'll find it floating around at the top of the screen, but if y'all remember, I was not a big fan of the production value in Season 2. I felt like it was a huge departure from Season 1, but here in The Ultimatum, it almost feels like they took some of that money that Season 2 could have used for Love is Blind and brought it here for Season 1. You got some pop songs that are fine, I guess, sometimes a little cheesy, and sometimes they work, and then you have edits that are surprisingly well done, but there are the other things in this season where they kind of jump cut a little too quickly. So there are moments where the editing overall is a little inconsistent, but for the most part, it really is something enjoyable. But before we move on from the edits, there were some really funny moments here. Early on in the season, there was a conversation about sci-fi books. I'll just leave it at that. That kind of made me laugh. So at least the producers get it. And there's a formula here that Netflix is playing with where it seems like they're coming up with new games and new experiences to really keep the viewer engaged. So if you're a fan of these like very dramatic and well, over the top kind of reality TV dating shows, Ultimatum might be up your alley. And I thought in terms of picking the contestants, they did a pretty good job. Yes, this bunch is kind of polar opposites of one another. You have one extreme side of the spectrum with April and Jake, for example, and then you have Rae and Zay, who are, well, let's just say I don't know if they're that far along in their relationship yet to even be thinking about marriage, but we're getting into that in my spoiler thoughts. But right now we're going to keep this spoiler free. I actually really liked how they, after that rough start out of the gate, kind of got us into the groove of things and them sort of interacting with one another, and they never really told us too much about the other partner. So I was forming opinions on my own, and I'm sure a lot of you did too. And for as much as the games that they would play, and I literally mean games like Truth or Dare or Confession, Take a Drink or whatever, as much as those games made me upset and annoyed sometimes because there's a lot of them, they actually provided for some really awkward and funny moments. Emphasis on the awkward, and there was this one episode early on, I think it was episode 2, where they did a girls' night out and a boys' night out, and the girls' night out was really awkward, and the boys' night out was about to, well, they were about to throw hands. Actually, it might not be episode 2, that might come later in like the middle of the season, but it was just kind of wild to see all that go down. But there are definitely moments in this season that will make you go, oh my gosh, and then there are some moments that'll make you feel, Okay, I saw that coming. So at least this season, so far through 8 episodes, has made me feel something. So we got good production, some inconsistent editing, but it does provide for some laughs, and then you have a decent group of participants that make for some fun reality TV. But honestly, what really holds this season back at first is the lack of introduction for these couples, and sometimes I feel like the couples make decisions that you can tell are genuinely put on them by the producers. There's a moment with Shanique and Randall, and I thought this would never fly with any of the other contestants because the rules were clearly laid out, and then they broke them conveniently. Okay. But again, for the most part, episodes 1 through 8 does provide for some enjoyable moments, some head-scratching moments, and my goodness, I can't wait to see who answers the ultimatum and how. Yeah. It's gonna be fun, guys. But you know what? That's all I got for my spoiler-free thoughts. So from this point onward, we're getting into all my spoiler commentary on all of our couples and the trial couples. So again, if you haven't watched all 8 episodes, please come back. Let me know down below in the comments what you think after you go ahead and listen to this portion of the review. So you know what, guys? Let's get into it. So the couples coming into the show were Alexis and Hunter, who were dating for 2 years, Lauren and Nate, who were dating for 2.5 years, Madlyn and Colby, who were dating for 1.5 years, Shanique and Randall, who were dating for 1.5 years as well, and then you have April and Jake, who were dating for 2 years, and lastly Rae and Zay, who were dating for 2.5 years. So we're gonna start with Alexis and Hunter here because, well, Alexis issued the ultimatum, and I'm gonna be completely honest, I almost thought, Hunter, I'm praying for you, dog, because Alexis doesn't seem very stable here. There were some moments she had experienced early on when they were trying to get to know one another and they were getting to understand, okay, this is the game, we have to figure out who we're going to live with for the next 3 weeks or so. So she was trying to get to know Colby, and Colby clearly wasn't feeling her, but Alexis was kind of, you know, putting the pressure on, and I don't know, something in my mind was telling me that Alexis doesn't seem to be very well. Hunter is definitely softer in terms of his personality than Alexis, and even though April chose Hunter at first, he was dead set on marrying Alexis. And if there's one thing I will give Alexis credit for, it's that she cuts through all the BS, especially at her bachelorette party. And oh, I guess I just spoiled my next point. Yeah, they get engaged. More on that in a little bit. But at her bachelorette party, guys, Alexis was not taking anything. No excuses. She was trying to get down to the nitty-gritty and tell these girls that y'all need to start thinking about the future here. You can't just be playing this game thinking you're going to get from point A to point B and that's it. Who do you actually have a relationship with? And I thought that was kind of wild, but you know what? It made for good TV. Okay, so on to the next point here. Yes, Hunter proposed to Alexis at the dinner where they were actually supposed to choose their trial couples. That was probably the most shocking moment of this season so far. I did not expect that at all, you guys. And I was not expecting Alexis to even say yes, but she did. And we don't know what's going to happen with them. We haven't heard from them since, honestly. Yes, we heard from Alexis about her bachelorette party and whatnot, but we don't know about them together, if they, of course, went through with it. It seems like they will, honestly, but who knows what happens in the 9th episode and in the reunion. But I cannot believe they got engaged. Okay, so let's move on now to Lauren and Nate. And listen, I'm trying to use my words here, okay? So Nate gave Lauren the ultimatum, right? But here's the thing. I don't necessarily think Nate even understood what he wanted out of this. Lauren, she made some comments that I was scratching my head at, of course. She said that in a relationship, she doesn't believe in sacrifices. And I'm like, girl, what? But then Nate annoyed me too because he didn't know how to communicate with Lauren. He kept cutting her off, and then he acted a certain type of way around some of the women on their show. Let's just say he was displaying snake behavior, you guys, okay? He was moving really fast with Shanique over the course of the first 2 episodes, and I thought it was a little weird because she wasn't really vibing with him, and he was trying to, I guess, put the pressure on Shanique in a way, and I'm like, man, you need to just back off a little bit. So because that didn't work out, he was like, let me go and try with April and dating April. So he was in between both, but I don't think they were going to choose him. So at dinner, Lauren and Nate, of course, also see Alexis and Hunter get engaged. So Nate decided to call an audible when he found out that maybe no one's going to date him. He got up and got down on one knee with Lauren to kind of like scoop Alexis and Hunter's moment, which I didn't agree with, and I'm glad April said something and spoke up about it because, y'all, that was, again, snake behavior. And what makes it worse is that after Hunter proposed, Nate said he was going to choose Madlyn. How sketchy is that? Now, did he vocalize it for everyone to hear? No, but he got Madlyn's attention and was like, I'm going to choose you. And I'm like, are you serious? But shortly after, we do get some video of them talking among one another, and Lauren said she won't let Nate marry her if they don't resolve their kids issue. I mean, what did Nate think? That this was gonna just fix everything by proposing to her? Dude, I don't know. There's something about these two that just never really kind of worked for me right off the bat, and I guess I was proven right because this ain't it. So because Alexis and Hunter and Lauren and Nate are engaged to their partner, they're not on the show for the rest of the season, which is funny. So now let's get into a couple that definitely is, and that is Madlyn and Colby. Oh my gosh, y'all. I could not believe what transpired between these two over the course of the first 8 episodes. Where do we start? I guess we should start here. There was this tension that was kind of boiling between both of them, and it ended up bubbling and pouring over by episode 6. There's a lot of unresolved conflict between these two, and they just don't necessarily know how to work very well. But I almost felt bad for Madlyn towards the end of this 8-episode stretch right here in season 1, because Colby kept trying to put the blame on Madlyn for a lot of their shortcomings. But let me not skip ahead too far, and let's get into some of their earlier flings before they made their choice. So Madlyn was definitely feeling Randall, and I mean, listen, Randall was feeling her too, and I thought that was an odd pairing, but I just kept, you know, going along with it. Colby was definitely not feeling Alexis like we mentioned earlier, but Colby ended up being the hot commodity during the first 2 episodes. And it was really interesting to hear him say that Lauren was his number 1 when she didn't even show him signs. I think this was more Colby just being attracted to her and less of Lauren actually feeling like there was something that could be reciprocated. And I thought one of the red flags for Colby at the start was really him telling Lauren that she brings out the best in him. They hardly know one another, and I just don't know why he would even say things like he doesn't think about Madlyn when he's around Lauren. So we'll move off this topic soon, but the last thing I gotta say about Colby here in this instance is that Colby was so quick to push Madlyn aside. Yes, he gave the ultimatum to Madlyn, but I don't necessarily know why he was so quick to move on from it. It's almost like he was planning this in his mind all along, that he wanted to try and have an open relationship, which it's not very healthy. So eventually we hear that Madlyn says she can see herself falling in love with Randall and that he checks off all of her boxes, and girl, you probably wanted him to do much more than that. I'll leave it there. But again, both Madlyn and Colby really showed that they couldn't talk and have a conversation with one another, to the point where Colby actually walked out after Madlyn found out that, well, Colby was making out with other girls outside of the experiment. And his excuse is that he wanted to make this real for Madlyn. He wasn't feeling it with April, so he wanted to make it real for Madlyn and go off and hook up with other girls and end up at their hotel room at 4 in the morning. Homie, I don't know. And then Colby really does try to save face throughout the course of this argument, where he says he thinks they're the strongest couple. Madlyn says, I don't think so. And then eventually they begin to work through the argument, or so we thought. There's even a moment towards the end of episode 8, I believe, where Madlyn tells herself, I'm ready to marry Colby. And then they have one final dinner before the ultimatum has to be answered. And won't you know it, Colby again puts the blame on Madlyn for the whole making out with other girls thing, because Madlyn was trying to get him to say that he regrets that decision, or if he feels like he regrets it, he should speak up. But clearly Colby doesn't regret the decision. He said he regrets the way he went about making it real for Madlyn. If that ain't the most roundabout way of saying, I didn't care about my actions and I regret nothing, I don't know what is. So eventually Madlyn feels like enough is enough and says she can't leave with Colby, but only time will tell whether or not they actually go through with this engagement period. So we'll see. But now let's move on to Shanique and Randall, and I need to drink some water for this one because it got kind of crazy. So Shanique issued the ultimatum to Randall, and yeah, they haven't been dating for too long, but she felt ready for marriage and Randall didn't. And at first I thought that they seemed like a very tame couple. They were mature and they weren't really yelling at one another, and they seemed to come in here level-headed, but
the lie detector determined that was a lie.
So eventually we start to see Shanique and Randall go off and kind of talk to other men and women. So Shanique and Zay were feeling each other, and yes, they become a trial couple, but more on that soon. And then you have Shanique and Nate at one point, and I'm just so glad that didn't happen, but you could just tell Shanique had these men wrapped around her fingers. But when it comes to Randall, him and Madlyn kind of had that connection at first, and they never really dated around. But the one thing that was kind of apparent is that Madlyn is very physical, and she's always talking about sex, and Randall wasn't afraid to talk about sex either, but I do think that Madlyn favored the physical over the emotional a little too much in the beginning of this season. If anything, Randall kind of helped her understand that there's much more than just physicality to a relationship, and you know, props to Randall for doing that. However, the one rule that Shanique and Randall broke during this trial couple period was they spoke to one another when they weren't supposed to during episode 5. And for me, the first question was, why did the producers allow this to happen? How was this a part of the experience? It's almost unfair because it actually ruins the ebb and flows that these trial couples are supposed to go and experience among one another. This is one of those producer-driven moments that I felt like maybe was a little unnecessary, but y'all, what was apparent is that they definitely had a lot of things that they had to get through and talk about, because they had a lot of bottled up frustration that they just unleashed on each other in that one episode. But eventually Shanique says that she is ready to marry Randall, but Randall lets her know, I'm still undecided. So of course that makes Shanique a little upset, angry, and I'm almost wondering if Shanique even goes through with giving the ultimatum the chance to be answered during episode 9. I'm curious about that, but they both seem like they're not in the best place right now. But Randall isn't upset at Shanique. Randall just wants to try and maybe take some more time to think about this. However, Shanique is not about that, so it's about to get kind of wild. Alrighty, 2 more couples left, you guys. Let's talk about April and Jake, because April and Jake. Listen, April issued that ultimatum. There's something that I think one of her family members or something like that, Jake's family members, called her in this show. They called her the Filipino firecracker, or a Filipino firecracker, because, listen, y'all, she has so much energy and she is so very much clingy, you know what I mean? And, well, Jake is the opposite. Now, does this mean they're not good for one another? No, but this sort of seeps out into their communication styles. Even though they both came into this very confident about their relationship, and yes, Jake was vehemently against, is that even the right word? He was definitely against this experience. They both decided to go through with it. However, I think one found a better relationship over the other in terms of how they felt about it. And yeah, that was Jake with Rae. And when it comes to April, she got together with Colby, and even though they were kind of feeling each other at first, Colby told her, nah, this ain't about to happen. Now, we'll talk about why that's really funny later. But yeah, I just think that Jake and April, they were really trying to make it work after the trial period. And there were some things that April found on Jake's phone, you know, with Rae shaking a certain body part into the camera. And I'm sure Jake probably didn't think much of it at the time, but homie, you're in a relationship, so why is that okay? Anyway, April was definitely not feeling that. So April had a lot of frustration that she took out on Jake, and they had some off-camera, I guess, arguments that we didn't get to see, but yeah, they were going through it. But then Jake also found that April was texting guys at this nightclub, and there was a lot of arguing on their first night back up until their last night together before the ultimatum. However, towards the end, April said that she was getting an ultrasound test, and throughout this, April expressed that she is dealing with infertility issues, which is a huge and a sensitive subject for any woman to talk about and be courageous enough to bring up in front of millions of audience members that are going to be watching this show. So I do have to, you know, give props to April for even bringing this up, but she went and took an ultrasound test, and of course she wasn't pregnant, because if she was, I'd imagine the show would have taken a different turn at the end. But I do think that April, in the back of her mind, was a little nervous about the test coming back negative. She wanted to, of course, be a mother so badly, so she was hoping for the best outcome here. And the way she made it sound was that Jake wanted her to get the test, but not in a way like, oh my god, this is so exciting. Almost in a way like, you're 12 weeks late? No, you better get that test. Like, I ain't ready yet. So if that's the case, it is a little sad. So I can definitely understand why April was a little mad, unfocused, and she left a little frustrated. But more so than that, she knew that Jake was undecided, because there's one X factor here for Jake, and that is Rae. Rae and Jake end up meeting at the end of episode 8, and Rae tells Jake that she's now newly single and stuff, and that is a whole mess. But you know what, speaking of Rae and Zay, let's go ahead and get into it. So Rae issues the ultimatum to Zay, and at first I was like, Rae is going to be a handful this season. She even has a quote here where she says, I cook, I clean, and I know how to... Pause. Nope. Not saying it. This is a PG review. But man, oh man, does Zay seem like a total opposite to Rae, because he's very closed off, not always present in conversations, which is interesting. But we find out that he's also not always present when he's living with Rae. He's a nightclub promoter of some sort, and he's always at nightclubs. He's on Instagram flaunting his shirt and with these ladies and stuff. So I could see why Rae maybe has a little bit of jealousy there. But yeah, both of them are really going on this roller coaster ride through 8 episodes. But one red flag early on for me was when the producer asked Rae, can you explain why you love Zay? And Rae couldn't answer that question. So to me, this was more so Rae probably looking to explore other options before really finding out whether or not she could even marry Zay herself. So Jake and Rae have this convo early on. They end up becoming that trial couple, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But man, I think that this affected Zay in a different type of way, because he almost felt like, okay, maybe I am losing her, and he keeps talking about his past. He did come up, from what he said, in a very broken household where his parents actually don't even know his birthday, which is heartbreaking, of course. But I do think that there were moments where he was using that almost as a crutch to some degree for going out and partying until 8 in the morning and turning off his location, not texting Rae back. Those sort of things were your significant other. So I just, listen, that's something they're going through, but I will say that Rae had every reason to be a little upset at him there. But towards the end of these 8 episodes, Rae did something that I don't think is excusable, and she actually punches Zay. Do we see that? No. But do we hear about it? Yes. So Rae admits that she hit Zay, she shouldn't have, and Zay was upset about it, but Rae said, you know what, this is my tipping point, I cannot do this right now, or maybe any longer. So she calls it off, and eventually, yeah, they break up. But there's a reason why they're still a part of this season, and I do think it has to do with Rae and Jake. Alrighty, so now the moment you've probably been waiting for. Let's break down the trial couples, because these choices were made during episode 2, and y'all, oh my gosh. Let's start with Shanique and Zay, because Shanique tells us that she's never lived with anyone before and Zay has. So even though they were sleeping separately together at first, eventually Shanique lets Zay sleep in the same bed. But of course he can't be under the same sheets or the same comforter or whatever the case might be. Well, those stipulations change, especially because they end up doing some things in bed towards the end of their trial period. But Shanique helped Zay kind of break through this mold of him trying to be a better listener and a better communicator, and Zay helped Shanique maybe come down and be a better listener herself. But one thing that threw me for a loop was Shanique introducing Zay to her family. So I didn't think that any of these trial couples were introducing their trial significant other to their families, but I guess it's happening. And Shanique's family is so sweet. I love Shanique's grandmother, Pearl, if I'm not mistaken is her name. And when Zay opens up and talks about how his biological parents just don't even know when his birthday is and he gets no phone calls from his parents on his birthday, Shanique's grandmother says, "You can call me and I'll wish you a happy birthday." And I'm like, listen, y'all, if that ain't one of the most sweetest moments of the season, I don't know what is. However, Shanique and Zay really just didn't know how to communicate too well, unfortunately. They did make up pretty quickly, and, well, that's what led to certain activities. But it almost feels like Shanique was on Zay's mind almost the whole time after their trial period, because Zay does meet up with Shanique for drinks after breaking up with Rae. And Shanique is actually doing a pretty good job at letting him know that he has to not only see where he can improve, but accept fault at the same time. He shouldn't have got out that late, and also he needs to maybe just work with Rae and give her the grace that she needs. But Zay did not want to hear that, of course, and took it the wrong way, I think, to some degree. So Zay really did expose his trust issues here, and Shanique, even though she tried speaking with him calmly and didn't blow up in his face, eventually that conversation ended prematurely. So it's safe to say they're not going to be a thing. So let's move on to the next trial couple, and that is Jake and Rae. This is the couple I think that has the strongest chance of actually making it out of this show together. And I feel bad for April just saying that, but yeah, they had a, I think, genuine connection here. However, it was really weird that Jake said off camera that he'd sleep with Rae, and he says, and I quote, "Who wouldn't? Listen, homie, I don't care where your mind goes, okay? The enemy will attack you right between your eyes sometimes, and you need to rebuke that," because he was just speaking to speak towards the beginning of the season and said, "Of course I'd sleep with her. That's a red flag, man. You're still with April. Like, that ain't cool." But then the show paves the way for them living together, and the first week that they did, they were really feeling one another, to the point where they were the first couple, at least that we saw on camera, that kissed. And I didn't think any of the trial couples were going to get there that fast, but they definitely did. They seemed to be enjoying each other's time, but it did seem like, to me, that things were almost too good to be true here, and I think it did end up that way at some point. Even though Jake met Rae's father and he gave them his blessing, and I just felt like I was leaning on the side of Jake's mother, who didn't like the process, honestly. Jake's mom was like, "Listen, honey, slow down," and I don't know if Jake really kind of listen to her because they kept moving forward pretty quickly, acting as if they don't have another significant other they have to go back to. So yes, this kind of exposes the craziness of this entire experience, but it did make me feel icky watching this, knowing that April and Colby weren't really getting along, and Shanique and Zay didn't really have as much of a connection compared to Jake and Rae. So yeah, it was weird. I mean, heck, they even started talking about a family together. Are you kidding me? But Jake eventually tells Rae, especially after their trial period, that he wants to give April a chance to work through this. But in the back of Jake's mind, he says something very telling. He says, well, at least Rae is always an option. And I'm like, oh no, that's not good. Alrighty guys, so let's move on to Madlyn and Randall, the next trial couple here. And yeah, you can tell that their tension was there. And I don't mean tension as an argumentative. I mean like tension as in physical tension, because it almost felt like Randall did want to do things with Madlyn. Madlyn definitely wanted to do things with Randall, but Randall kind of, you know, maybe listened to his better self and thought, okay, wait a second, we're trying to take away something from this experience that will better us. This ain't just like, you know, an open relationship type of deal. He wanted to bring something back to the table with Shanique to help him in that decision. However, Madlyn really wanted to sleep with this guy, and that's all she kept talking about. But something about these two just never felt right. It really was an odd connection, and eventually I think Randall did show that, okay, we are not going to get physical, I just want to talk with you. And I don't know. The reason I say I don't know is because both of them, they definitely, you know, drank a lot. So it's like some of these conversations, I'm like, do we take it seriously or not? But they were clearly not going to take those next steps together. And I would imagine that Shanique and even Colby probably appreciated that. However, they did kiss on camera, so I thought that was interesting. I wonder if that, you know, spark maybe comes back around again. Who knows, but it does set up for a very interesting moment during the Ultimatum episode in episode 9. Alrighty, so now let's get into Colby and April, probably the least interesting trial couple. I think all the events that we learned about when it came to Colby's actions after the fact were much crazier than what happened between these two, because they were not vibing with one another. They didn't even really officially show them choosing one another during episode 2, which I found really odd. Even though they were clashing at first though, I almost felt like, okay, maybe they're helping one another. But no, guys, listen, there were stretches here where April was sick at home, and then Colby was just kind of farting around doing whatever he was doing, and they didn't really seem like they were together. You know, like they were just there to get through the 3 weeks and whatever. But there was a moment at the end, guys. I'm wagging my finger because for those of you who saw the episode I'm talking about, they did some stuff. And it was Colby who initiated it. Yes, of course, April went with it, but man, Colby and April, I think they slept together. And after learning about what Colby did with those girls in the club and going back to their hotel room and stuff, I wouldn't put it past Colby, you know? So yeah, even though Colby wasn't really feeling April, and April felt the same way where she was like, this ain't really working for me, they definitely tried it at the end. Who knows if they took it all the way, you know, around the bases and stuff, but it definitely seemed like it. So out of all the trial couples, I will say the one that was probably the strongest was Jake and Rae, and the weakest was Colby and April. But what this show does is it sets up these trial couples in the middle of the season, right? And then we get another 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, it's another 3 weeks with the regular couples after they went through the trial period together. So it does make for some entertaining TV, and we start to see some of the dynamics blow up, or they reconcile and they come together and say, okay, we're going to be better. But for the most part, all the original couples kind of in shambles right now. And the tease at the end of episode 8 has me believing that there's maybe not going to be one couple that makes it out of this. So on Ultimatum Day, we have Shanique and Randall, Madlyn and Colby, and April and Jake. And that's during episode 9, which of course I can't talk about yet. I actually, at the time of recording this, haven't seen it because I didn't want to spoil this review and, you know, not give you my honest opinion. So I have nothing to tell you about any of these Ultimatum couples, but I think there's only one that maybe makes it out, and that might be April and Jake. But again, April said she was done with Jake. She was upset with Jake, and Jake is clearly thinking about Rae. So what gives? I guess only time will tell you guys. So there you have it. That's my real review and recap of all 8 episodes of The Ultimatum. I don't know how I did it, but I did it by the grace of God. Again, if you did watch all 8 episodes, let me know down below in the comments your thoughts on everything so far in season 1. Do you like this show even better than Love is Blind? If you had to ask me, no, Love is Blind is still above it, but surprisingly, I am enjoying The Ultimatum much more than I thought I would. And hey, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, because we're coming back for my review and recap of episodes 9 and 10. And if these reunion episodes are anything like Love is Blind, it's about to get kind of hot up in here. Yeah. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. Oh boy. Alright, I need to decompress. I need to do some yoga, downward dog. I don't know. You know that one thing, the bridge pose? Or no, I can't pop my shoulders out. Bad idea.